I already had my coffee. This is mushroom tea now. Speaking of which, I need to order some. I'm running out. Should write that down. Let's see. It's very important to plan ahead in life. We're not going to be discussing planning ahead today. Actually, we are a little bit. But when you're about to be out of tea or coffee, you better make sure you order some so you have some. My mom's in the chat. Good morning, good morning. Hope you're having a great day. Today, we're going to talk about poker. I know the show's called A Little Coffee, but we're going to talk about poker today. Louis Philippe in the chat, good morning, suggested this topic. Thank you very much for that. Today we're going to be discussing when to 4-bet, and more specifically, when to cold 4-bet. So, today we're going to be discussing when someone raises, someone re-raises, and now it's your turn. What do you do? That is referred to as a cold 4-bet. The term cold call, cold 4-bet, etc. is a little bit confusing to some people. Essentially, it means you have you've not voluntarily put any other money in the pot before the action gets to you. So in this scenario, someone raises, someone re-raises, you have no money in the pot, and now you re-raise. That is substantially stronger than if you raise, someone 3-bets, and then it gets back to you as the pre-flop aggressor, and then you 4-bet because you already have money in the pot and you know you are closing the action, right? So, today we want to discuss the specific situation of when you get cold, or when you should cold 4-bet, because there's already charts out there. Our GTO app discusses very clearly when you should put in the 4-bet whenever you raise someone 3-bets and it's back to you. That's very clear. You're usually just 4-betting very polarized. There's not a whole lot to say about that beyond follow the charts and then adjust accordingly, right? Like if your opponent's super tight when they 3-bet, obviously don't 4-bet bluff. But you should be 4-bet bluffing sometimes. And a lot of people never 4-bet bluff because either they're deathly afraid of running into the nuts or losing their stack, or they are afraid of looking foolish when they have to turn up a bluff or something like that. Usually you're going to find your bluffs in that scenario, though, when you're just putting in a normal 4-bet. You raise someone 3-bets, you 4-bet. You're usually 3-betting your best hands in some like ace-x blocker type hands. Nick says, hit the like button. Indeed, hit the like button. Do I like cold coffee as much as hot coffee? Depends on the day. If it's 95 degrees outside, I much prefer cold coffee. If it's 30 degrees outside, I much prefer hot coffee. You got $500 in the last 2 days. You started playing 3 days before, or you started watching the video shortly before that. Seems like it's working. Well, good. That's the goal. We discuss this quite often, but essentially, anytime you start studying poker for the first time, or if you're studying good content for the first time, you're going to find that you're going to make very, very quick leaps and bounds in terms of your poker skills because you're probably making a whole lot of mistakes. And if you just stop making even a few of those, it's going to result in you winning a whole lot more money. Seems like there should be a live versus online distinction made here. I completely disagree, Dr. Mize. Live players rarely 3-bet light, so you're going to be up against a strong hand. It's not live players that's the issue here. It is weak, tight, straightforward players. And Dr. Mize, there are weak, tight, straightforward players online and live. They're in both games. I will generally say that the games usually are more weak and loose and passive live, but that's because live players typically play worse than online players because they have not had the time to put in many, many hands and learn the requisite skills to beat the game. The online players typically have had time to figure out the game because they played many, many more hands. And also, if they lose, well, they're going to figure out they're losers way faster and they're going to quit, right? So, this is a situation where I don't think there's a big distinction between live and online, ever, really. The main distinction is what is your opponent's tendencies, period. Doesn't matter the venue they're playing on. If they only 3-bet the best hands online, and they only 3-bet the best hands live, then your strategy is the same against both, right? There's no real difference. How many people are 4-bet bluffing in the small stakes, though? Many never fold, and they will call with stuff like King 3 suited. Oh, Matthew, you just hit on the main point here. If you raise, someone 3-bets you, and they're going to call your 4-bet with King 3 suited, what should you do? Well, you should 3-bet or 4-bet with a good, strong, linear range, right? If your opponents are going to play horribly, as Craig says here, did I say Matthew? I think I meant Craig. If they're going to play horribly and call your 4-bet with all sorts of nonsense, just 4-bet with a strong, linear range. And you're going to find that in situations like this, whenever you want to cold 4-bet, we're going to talk about the topic of the day now, Someone raises, someone 3-bets, it's on you. What should you do? All right, period. First things first. Do you want to have a flat calling range? Should you call with anything? Take a second, think about it. The answer is not yes or no, by the way. What does it depend on? There's one gigantic factor here that will impact whether or not you should have a flat calling range. Does anybody know it? Type it in. I'm going to give you a second. Peter says, you wish your opponents called your 4-bets with King 3 suited. Yeah, me too. You print all the money. Should you 3-bet more or flat call more late in the tournament? You should typically 3-bet more because stacks will be shallower and the amount you win is usually way more substantial as you get shallower. You got my new book and you love it. Thank you, Peter. If you liked it, leave a review on Amazon. I would appreciate it. None of you have gotten the answer right yet. Charles almost has it. Stack depth is the answer. If you're playing very deep stacked, like 125 or 150 big blinds or more, it is perfectly fine to develop a flat calling range against a 3-bet because you can still realistically set mine or try to draw to like good suited connected hands. Like say, hijack raises, cut off 3-bets, we're on the button, and we have pocket 8s, right? That's a hand we can very reasonably call for a 7, 8, 9, 10 big blind 3-bet when we're playing 200 big blinds deep. And as long as we don't get 4-bet, it's okay. And if you know you're not going to get 4-bet all that often, you can call 7, 8, 9, 10 big blinds and see the flop, right? Okay, so that makes sense. What about if you have like Jack 10 suited? It also makes sense. Call and see the flop. But if we're playing 40 big blinds deep, you cannot put in 7, 8, 9, 10 big blinds out of your stack pre-flop with any hand, with the idea that you're only going to continue post-flop if you flop a strong hand. So, as you are deeper stacked, it is fine to have a calling range of a 3-bet, a cold calling range of a 3-bet. This is when you have no other money in the pot, right? Obviously, it's very different whenever you raise, someone 3-bets you, and then it's back on you. Very, very different. Is our cold calling range mainly low pairs and suited aces? Well, when we're 200 big blinds deep, it's going to be hands like, basically the hands you're not willing to get it all in with. So this is going to be stuff like queens, jacks, 10s, 9s, 8s, 7s, roughly. And then just the very good suited connected stuff, like ace queen suited, king queen suited, queen jack suited, jack 10 suited, 10 9 suited, 9 8 suited. And that's basically it. I'm not calling with the low suited aces because those are going to be very, very dominated. You don't want to be very, very dominated. So you're not calling with the bad hands. Like you don't want to call pocket 2s there because sometimes when you make pocket 2s, you're going to end up being set over set. Whereas with like pocket jacks, you're way less likely to be set over set. And when you're playing 200 big blinds deep, you don't necessarily want to 4-bet the pocket jacks. So if you 4-bet and then get 5-bet, now you have to fold a hand that is very, very good. I see all of you asking a bunch of random questions. This is not an Ask Me Anything. We are trying to stay on topic today. We're discussing when to cold 4-bet. Not discussing anything else, okay? If you have bankroll questions, check out jlpoker.com/bankroll, okay? What about 3-betting from the small blind or the big blind? Slow down, everyone. Slow down, everyone. Slow down, everyone. You all have a difficult time staying on topic, don't you? Maybe I have a difficult time staying on topic. Maybe I'm just supposed to ignore the chat. Okay. So now you know the hands you should be flat calling with when you're deep stacked. Which hands should you be 4-betting with when you're deep stacked? Well, when you're 4-betting, in almost all scenarios when you're 4-betting, you typically want to be very, very polarized. However, the polarized hands you want to have are going to end up looking very, very strong, right? Because if you're flat calling ace queen suited and king queen suited and queen jack suited, what does your 4-bet range look like? Well, you're 4-betting aces and kings, maybe queens, ace king. What's the next best hand that we are not calling with that also that has like relevant blockers and or value, right? Well, in this scenario, the obvious bluff is ace queen offsuit, right? Because we're not flat calling ace queen offsuit. So ace queen offsuit is going to be the very clear 4-bet bluff. You don't want to 4-bet pocket jacks as a bluff, Glenn, because if you 4-bet pocket jacks and then get 5-bet, it's not good. So you're going to find in this scenario, pretty much exclusively, if you are flat calling the good suited connected hands, and the medium pairs, the next best hands to bluff are going to be hands that contain an ace blocker. If you're calling ace-jack suited, which maybe you are, maybe you aren't, you probably aren't, ace-jack suited becomes a good bluff, right? Same thing with ace-10 suited, same thing with ace-jack offsuit. Those are almost always going to be your bluffs in these scenarios. You don't want to be 4-betting king-10 suited, ace-7 suited, all that is way, way, way too wide. Because why would you ever 4-bet king-10 suited when you're not 4-betting, when you're not playing king-jack suited? It doesn't make sense, right? You want to make sure that the hands that you are 4-betting with are right on the cusp of playability. And if you're folding, let's say ace-8 suited and ace-9 suited, why in the world would you possibly play ace-7 suited? It doesn't make sense, right? So, in this scenario, you're going to want to be 4-betting with a very polarized range, but those hands in the 4-betting range are going to appear to be very, very strong. So some people get this a little bit confused and say this is a linear range, but it's not. It just turns out ace-queen offsuit is a bluff, and ace-queen offsuit's a bluff, and ace-king offsuit is a value hand. We assume, though, that the villain's 5-bet range will crush ace-queen offsuit, so it becomes a good 4-bet. Yeah, exactly, Mark. Whenever your opponent 5-bets, you fold ace-queen offsuit, because you're going to be very dominated most of the time. And also, you want to be 4-betting ace-queen and ace-jack before hands like 8, 7, 6s, 5s, 4s, because ace-queen and ace-jack have a blocker to their high card hands. Actually, it's 2 blockers, right? Okay. So that's when you want to be 4-betting when you're deep stacked. What about when you're shallower stacked, when you don't want to have a flat calling range? We're not calling with anything now. Because we're not going to put in 7 or 8, 9 big blinds out of our 40 big blind stack and then fold it to a jam, right? So we're going to 4-bet every hand in our range. Well, now we are 4-betting with, again, what sort of appears to be a linear range, but again, it's a polarized range, but we just don't have any flat calls, right? So, call it what you want. It's basically a linear range. We understand that some of the hands in the linear range are going to be folding to the jam, assuming you're 4-betting like 75 big blinds deep. Like, let's say it goes 2.5, someone makes it 7, you make it 18, right? You can still 4-bet ace-queen there and then fold it to a jam. But say you're playing 40 big blinds deep, someone makes it 2.5, someone makes it 7, you're just going to go all in with every hand you want to jam with. So in this scenario, ace-queen offsuit turns out still does want to be re-raising basically every time. And same logic applies as before, except for now, like ace-queen offsuit's your bluff. Your bluff. Even though, if you're all in, you're basically all in, right? So you're going to end up getting it all in these scenarios, but it has the best blockers. So in this scenario, maybe you're jamming like 10s and better. 10s is kind of a bluff, but it has plenty of equity when you get called. Ace-king, ace-queen, ace-jack offsuit, king-queen suited, right? Maybe ace-10 suited instead of king-queen suited. Something like that. So those are typically the hands you want to be bluffing with when you have no flatting range. It's going to just be a good, strong, linear range, understanding that the bottom portion of that linear range are bluffs. Okay? 50 big blinds effective. You raise from the small blind with queens. Someone 3-bets you. Do you flat call or 4-bet jam? Peter, that's not the scenario we're talking about today. We're talking about when you get when you're cold 4-betting. Here, you're not cold 4-betting because you already put money in the pot. But no, I'm just all in. Queens are the nuts. What do you mean? You don't want to slow play queens out of position. If you 4-bet pre-flop with ace-queen and get called, and the flop shows 2 cards and a jack, 2 low cards and a jack, do you defend if he raises you after you bet the flop? So look, whenever you're deep stacked and you cold 4-bet and you get called, the strategy is to bet something like 20% pot on a lot of flops. Because you're going to have a huge range advantage because your range is aces, kings, queens, ace-king, and a few bluffs. You don't want to be 4-bet bluffing all the time, by the way. Don't always 4-bet ace-jack offsuit. We're going to talk about specifically when to adjust in the future. But you typically want to be betting small, because if it is jack 3-2, and you bet with your pocket aces or kings or queens, they're just drawing thin to dead with everything in their range, right? Obviously, sometimes they have you beat, I know that, but usually they don't. So in this scenario, you can bet very, very small. And if they do raise you, anytime you get raised, you're supposed to fold the bottom portion of your range unless you're getting the right odds to call. So what's the bottom portion of your 4-betting range on jack 4-2 when you 4-bet pre-flop? Aces, kings, queens obviously calls. Ace-king and ace-queen are the bottom of your range in this scenario for the most part. Notice if you have ace-jack, you have the nuts, right, on jack 4-2. So that's not the bottom of your range. If you have like ace-10 suited, that's the bottom of your range with only 4 combinations. So when you bet the ace-queen and get raised, you want to be folding. All right. So when should we specifically get out of line and start 4-betting more often? Well, take a second, think about it. you always want to be adjusting to take advantage of your opponent's tendencies. So when should you be 4-betting more often? Dio says, took advantage of the fall sale and became a premium member. You won a $100 bounty tournament for $5,700 last night. Congrats, good job, good work. We're having a fall sale right now, by the way. Today is the absolute last day to get it. Check it out, pokercoaching.com/fall sale. If you want to start studying hard from the best poker players in the world, get in there, pokercoaching.com/fall sale. I try to make all my resources accessible, reasonably priced. I think Poker Coaching Premium comes out to about $2 per day. If you are playing poker for any amount of money, if you're not spending $2 a day on improving your skills, and you're not studying a little bit, you're probably messing up. All right, Fernando nailed it. You want to be 4-betting more when the 3-better is 3-betting very wide, right? And the time the 3-better is going to be 3-betting the widest is when the initial raiser is raising wide. So in the ideal world, you want someone raising with a loose range and someone 3-betting with a loose range. When someone raises with a loose range and someone 3-bets with a loose range, that is the ideal time to attack. In tournaments, playing 40 big blinds deep, beautiful example of this. Someone raises, someone 3-bets, you know they're both loose. Let's say they're loose and they're in late position. Now they're really incentivized to be loose, right? In that scenario, you can jam all sorts of stuff for 40 big blinds. Maybe like any suited ace, right? King, queen suited, king, jack suited, queen, jack suited, pocket like 7s and better, ace, jack offsuit, maybe ace, 10 offsuit, king, queen offsuit. You can jam really, really wide in that spot because you have an immense amount of fold equity, okay? When you have an immense amount of fold equity, you should be jamming very wide, especially with hands that block their calling range. Louis Philippe says, is there ever any merit to 4-betting with the king blocker? Usually no, and that's just because you don't have a wide enough value range. Like when you're 3-betting wide, you have a much wider 3-betting value range, which allows you to 3-bet with more bluffs, right? And the next best bluffs after the ace highs are the king highs. But in this scenario, you're not 3-betting all that wide for value, therefore you don't get, you're not 4-betting all that wide for value in terms of number of combinations. Therefore, you don't get to 4-bet bluff with too many hands. Okay? Good. Hello from Russia. Hello from Germany. You all love my books. Good. By the way, if you like my books, please leave a review. Go to Amazon, go to Goodreads, go wherever you got it, and leave a review. That would be very, very helpful for me. I have a new book that came out recently, Excelling at Tough No-Limit Hold'em Games, and it needs a few more reviews. Look at MooBot right here, right on schedule. Excelling at Tough No-Limit Hold'em Games. jlpoker.com/tough if you want to get it. But it could use a few more reviews. I have hundreds of reviews for many of my other books, and Excelling only has a few. So let's get a few more. Let's see how many it has right now. I'll click on the link. Let's see if it brings it up properly. Actually, I don't think it is. That takes you to the D&B page where you can get it directly if you want to give Jonathan Little the most amount of money from buying it. Right now on Amazon. Oh, look at that. 10 reviews. You all listen to me. Thank you. Over the weekend, it had 4 reviews. Now it has 10, 4.5 stars. Excellent, excellent. Well, let's try to get up to 15 by the end of the show. I would love that. It'll take you 1 minute to leave a review, and I would appreciate it. Matt left a review. Thank you, thank you. So did Nate. Thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. All right. So you want to be 4-betting wide, specifically when initial raiser is loose and next player is loose. The 3-better is loose as well. What about if the initial raiser is tight and the 3-better is loose? Take a second. Is that a spot where you should consider getting out of line or not quite? Amazing webinar from Faraz. Implemented a strategy and took 11th place out of 3,300 people on Sunday. Congrats. Good job. Blue light pest control. Clearing out the pests and winning all the money. All right. So when the initial raiser is tight, but the 3-better is loose, you can still get pretty out of line when you're 4-bets. Why is that? It's because the initial raiser has to be very tight when it goes raise and 3-bet and 4-bet. Right? When it goes raise, 3-bet, and 4-bet, the initial raiser is going to look at this and say, ugh, well, what am I going to do, right? As they should, because you should have a very strong hand. You should have a very strong range in this scenario. So this is a spot where you can still get after it pretty wide, and you're going to find that the last aggressor is usually the most important aggressor that you need to be concerned with when trying to make exploitative plays, because the last aggressor is going to be the one who needs to defend the pot way more often than the other player. When someone has 2 big blinds in the pot, and the pot's already become like 40 or 30 or 20 or whatever it is, they don't have to defend all that often. There is one exception to this, and that is when the initial raiser is like really tight. Because then, even if the 3-better's loose, they have to be somewhat competent and realize, all right, this player's really tight, they're opening, and I'm still 3-betting, I must have a good hand. Other exceptions, if the initial raiser is very tight as well, and you know they're only raising like aces, kings, queens, jacks, and ace-king, if that's their range because they open like under the gun and they're nitty, well then you just don't want to 4-bet bluff there either, right? Because you're not trying to make someone fold out ace-king or pocket jacks. It just doesn't make sense. What should our 4-bet sizing be? Typically about 2.5 times the 3-bet size. It does depend on how big the 3-bet was. As the 3-bet was bigger, you can 4-bet smaller. As the 3-bet is smaller, you should typically 4-bet bigger. You should also 4-bet a little bit bigger from out of position. If you're going to be putting in more than like 35% of your stack, usually you want to be all in. So if you're playing 100 big blinds deep, it goes 2.5, 7. You can make it like 18 big blinds, right? If you're playing 40 big blinds deep, if it goes 2 and then 6, if you wanted to 4-bet, it would be to about 15. But 15 is, what is that, 40-ish% of 40. So in that scenario, you should probably be all in instead of 4-betting small, because you can't really 4-bet to even like 15 big blinds and then fold to a jam. Okay? All right. What about if the initial raiser is loose and then the 3-better is pretty tight? Should we 4-bet wider than normal in that scenario? Take a second. Think about it. Commit to the answer. Type it in. This is a quiz show, apparently. If you like quizzes, by the way, check out pokercoaching.com. We have over 1,000 interactive hand quizzes where I walk you through difficult situations. I do. The other coaches do. Check it out, pokercoaching.com/fall sale. There's 1,000 of them there. You'll be busy for forever. All right. No one's typed in their answer. Makes me scared the internet died. When the initial raiser is loose and the 3-better is tight, you probably don't want to be getting all that out of line, right? Because the 3-better very often won't care all that much about the initial raiser's range. They're just 3-betting with the best hands, right? So if they're 3-betting with the best hands, then you probably don't want to get too out of line, right? And there are going to be some instances where you should have no 4-bet bluffs, by the way. Like let's say middle position opens, then a tight-ish player who you know only 3-bets with the best hands 3-bets. What should your 4-betting range actually be there? It's going to be literally aces, kings, queens, and ace-king, and that's it. You may say, why even go with ace-king and ace-queen and... why even go with ace-king and queens? You don't have to. I typically do. Because you have to realize a lot of people are just going to 3-bet with like ace-queen and then fold it to a jam. Or they're going to 3-bet jacks and fold it to a jam. So you typically don't want to be 4-betting queens and better and ace-king. Although there certainly are instances where, like, I guess if under the gun opens and next player 3-bets, sure, I've folded ace-king there before plenty of times. I've folded queens there plenty of times. And usually feel pretty smart in those scenarios because they show up with the nuts. Every once in a while, they're both going to have ace-king, and you're going to be annoyed, but it's like, whatever, you know? They were going to have aces and kings there, clearly, too. Typically, though, ace-king is a very good hand just to get it all in with because it has the best blockers, right? And queens, you're more likely to be against ace-king than you are than aces and kings. And also, sometimes they have jacks, sometimes they have ace-queen, sometimes they have random bluffs. You have to understand, just because the 3-better, you think they're tight, it doesn't mean the 3-better must be tight. So many people think they know definitively what their opponent's strategy is. And I hate to break it to you, but you don't. You may think you do, but you do not. As much as you would like to say that you definitively know their strategy, you do not definitively know their strategy. So understand that your reads on people are going to be slightly wrong. To account for this in a very easy way, you should just basically always be 4-betting ace-king when you get down to like 60 big blinds or shallower. I'm usually just all in with the ace-king every time. Same thing with the queens. Okay. So I think that's it, right? Is there anything else you want to talk about pertaining to 4-betting? It's really not all that hard. You really should not be cold 4-betting all that often. The only time this gets a little bit dicey, though, is when you're very deep stacked. But fortunately, if you're playing tournaments, you're very rarely all that deep stacked. And in cash games, we already discussed how to have a calling range. Do not have a cold calling range of a 3-bet with all sorts of nonsense. Someone said earlier they wanted to cold call like ace-5 suited and pocket twos. Do not cold call 3-bets with those hands. That is a good way to light your money on fire. Maybe that should have been the name of this episode of A Little Coffee instead. What to not cold call with. Something you see a lot of players do wrong, by the way, is like they're playing either 50 big blinds deep in a tournament, and like let's say 50 big blinds deep in a tournament, someone raises someone 3-bets to 6 or 7 big blinds. They'll just call with 10-9 suited or pocket sixes in position, and they think this is a good play because they have a drawing hand, right? They want to see the flop. But that is a big, big, big mistake. Also, there are situations where, let's say 100 big blinds deep, someone raises someone 3-bets and you have ace-5 suited or 7-6 suited or pocket twos. Again, just fold because sometimes you're going to get 4-bet, and also those hands aren't particularly great anyway. How often does a situation really occur, though, that you'll have a polarized range when there is a 3-bet? Seems like it doesn't happen more than 1 or 2 times per session. Yeah, it doesn't happen very often, Craig. But I mean, it still happens, right? You need to know which hands you want to be getting in with. You have to understand, poker's a big game, and I mean, certainly if you're very new to the game, you should study the scenarios that come up frequently. But I have to presume a lot of you are not totally new to the game, so therefore you need to look at the rarer situations. I'm telling you, Craig, a lot of people screw up in this scenario where someone raises someone 3-bets, they'll just fold ace-king, or they'll call with ace-king. And that is a disaster. And I do not want you making disasters. Don't make disasters, everyone. Can we cold call a Jack-10 suited? If you're playing very deep stacked, we discussed this earlier, the cold calling strategy. If you missed it, go back and rewatch the replay. Why is a cold call with a pocket pair okay when you're getting the right odds to set mine? Because MPTY8, you are going to get 4-bets sometimes. And when you get 4-bet, you have to fold. It's not as if you're always closing the action. You have to understand, when you're cold calling a bet, you are never closing the action, unless you're in the big blind and there wasn't a 3-bet. But it's not really a cold call at that point, I guess. But whenever someone raises and someone 3-bets, and it's on you, the initial raiser gets to 4-bet sometimes. And what stack depths as a 4-bet becomes a jam? There's some line where you're always jamming, usually like 45 or 50 big blinds. Usually like 5 or 6 times the initial 3-bet. Like I said, if you're putting in more than 35% of your stack, then you typically want to be all in. Certainly, though, as you get deeper, there are some hands that want to jam. If you look at the poker coaching app, in the GTO pre-flop section, you'll see that there are sometimes scenarios like 50, 60, 70 big blinds deep where you want to be ripping it in with your 4-bets instead of 4-betting small with some hands, usually like ace-king type hands, jacks and 10s type hands, stuff like that. Can you cold 4-bet when you feel like the 3-better is full of poop? We already discussed that, Rabul. We discussed that the best time to be 4-betting wide is when the 3-better is loose. How wide is way too wide? Funny enough, there's actually no way too wide because it depends on how much fold equity you have. There's this equation you can use. It's not going to be ideal if you're trying to write this down, but essentially, your equity in a pot is the percentage of the time your opponents fold times the amount you win. So let's say you know that both your opponents combined fold, 50% of the time. So in that scenario, you win the raise, the 3-bet, small blind, big blind, and ante. Okay? That number times the percentage of the time the initial raiser calls your all-in times your equity in the pot minus the amount you put in the pot. This is the total pot when you get called. Plus the percentage of the time the 3-better calls you times your equity in the pot minus the amount you put in the pot. Just a math equation. I discussed this way back in my first book, Secrets to Professional Tournament Poker. That's the math equation to figure out how much equity or how many big blinds how much equity you have in this scenario with your 4-bet. Okay? This is for all in scenarios. As you're deeper, it gets way more convoluted because you have to play post-flop sometimes. Okay? So that's how you go about figuring out how much equity you have in these scenarios. And if that first number in the equation, percentage of the time the opponents fold, becomes very high, 40, 50, 60, 70%, I can tell you if it's 70%, you can jam basically any 2 cards. Because in that scenario, you win so much when they fold. And when you do get it all in, yeah, you're losing, but it'll then be like, times 0.3, right? So the number becomes very small. And you have to understand when you get it all in, it's for a lot of big blinds, but you don't actually lose all of those because you win the pot sometimes, right? You usually have 30% equity against their calling range. So in that scenario, that's that. Should we call a 3-bet with 30 plus big blinds? Stan, we discussed this already. Please go back and rewatch. We're discussing cold calling, by the way, not calling of the 3-bet. You can obviously call 3-bets when you are shallow stacked. If you're the initial raiser and someone 3-bets you, it's perfectly fine to call, especially with hands that flop well. Matthew says, you remember that equation. It's tough to do on the fly, though. Well, Matthew, I have literally never done that equation on the fly. Because why would I do it on the fly when I could do it away from the table? You should not be doing algebra at the poker table, besides figuring out pot odds and whatnot. But even then, like, that's just becomes second nature eventually. You have to understand, all of this study you do away from the table is so that you don't have to try to do these things at the table, because you already know the answer, right? And I understand that it's sometimes tough to know specifically what your opponents are doing, and that's why it's important to know the principles that come from these things. Like, for example, loose raiser, loose 3-better, I know 4-bet wide. Question becomes how wide, and I, Jonathan Little, roughly know how wide I should adjust. And certainly I'm going to be wrong by a little bit here and there, but as long as you know that's a scenario where you can 4-bet wide, that's going to give you the ability to make these adjustments. Whereas if you just don't know because you never studied it, then you're going to have no clue what to do. And obviously you're not going to sit here and try to do math because you don't know your opponent's exact range. You don't know your equity in the pot necessarily. I can tell you your equity's not going to be very good when you do get called because you're putting in 40, 50 big blinds, whatever it is. Your opponent's going to have something good, right? So you're going to have, I don't know, 35% equity. But again, you don't need to do that on the fly. You should do that away from the table. Look at all these books back here. You think I wrote these so that I could do all that work at the table? No. You do that away from the table so that you know the answer. This is why people study at pokercoaching.com, because now they know the right play when they're at the table. They don't have to guess. They don't have to try to figure it out. If you're trying to figure it out on the fly, you are going to fail, and you're going to fail hard. Okay? You got to study away from the table if you want to be good at anything. Could you imagine if you were a doctor and you're going to do a surgery today, and you have never even considered this surgery away from the operating table? You think it'd be a little bit better if you studied the surgery away from the table first? Maybe studied how other people did it. Maybe actually practiced it a time or two, or you have a mentor over your shoulder helping you. Probably useful, right? All right, Mark says you want over 1,300 big blinds and 20 hours of live play. Good job, good work. Without my help on the bet sizing, the win would have been smaller. Well, good. All right. So, Fernando, pertaining to the implementable GTO charts, if you're trying to get very specific and look at 4-betting strategies, you're going to need to look at the GTO pre-flop charts that are in the Poker Coaching app. So what's a drill you can use to get the principle behind this formula? How to use it away from the table. Perry, I literally went through the equation just a second ago. You need to go through and figure out various things. How often is your opponent going to fold? Right? You need to learn to estimate this. How do you learn to estimate it? You learn what their ranges generally look like. Okay? Also, how much... So that's going to let you know how often they're going to call you. And then also you need to run your specific hands against their calling range. Because some hands flop way better than others. Like Ace-2 offsuit is going to do horribly when you get it all in. Whereas, Ace-10 suited is going to do a whole lot better. So that's very, very relevant. You need to learn the things, the knobs, right? Anytime you're looking at an equation, there are various things that can change here. Percentage of the time they can call changes. Amount you can win in the pot changes because the stack depth's going to be different. And your equity against their range is going to be different. Okay? You want a Hard Rock trophy. I have 2 Hard Rock trophies. There's one way up there at the top. Can you see that? It says Lucky Hearts way at the top. You see it right up there. That's a Hard Rock trophy from back in the day. Yeah. And then we have this one over here. It's a giant guitar pick. Yeah. I would give it to you, but I can't jam it through the computer, so maybe next time. All right. So that's it for today. Do you ever cold 4-bet suited connectors? Like Queen Jack suited, sure. If you know you have a ton of fold equity, sure. I've 4-bet 10-9 suited plenty of times. 9-8 suited plenty of times. You would obviously prefer, though, to use the blockers. Now, someone mentioned earlier, what if you just know they are full of poop, right? If you just know they're full of poop, you can look and tell the initial raiser is normal and the 3-better is obviously bluffing. Okay. Should you 4-bet the 6-3 suited? I would generally say no, but if you have reads that are that spot on, and you know they are not going to play back at you, Sure, right? I mean, you'll see this every once in a while where these very exploitative players are playing on TV and they'll just like randomly put in the bluff. And it's because the situation is optimal for it, right? They can just look and tell. I don't make that play very often because I'm not all that confident in my reads. Meaning, like, I can't just look and tell this guy's obviously bluffing, right? Because I don't know. What do you do if they go all in? Well, what do you think you do? You fold. Are you getting the right odds? If you're bluffing and you realize what your stack depth was, you have an obvious fold. You should basically never be in a scenario where you're pot committed to call with a bluff. You're allowed to fold pre-flop, by the way. Don't think you have to win every pot you play. You're supposed to lose some pots. How many big blinds did I used to buy in for cash games? Whatever the maximum was. Usually, when I was playing 5-10, it was $1,500. So, let's just make this perfectly clear so no one has any problems with this. Let's say we're playing 75 big blinds deep, like you will be in the earlier middle levels of a tournament. Someone raises to 2.5 big blinds. Someone makes it 7 big blinds. You make it 17 big blinds with ace-queen offsuit. And then someone goes all in. How many big blinds do you have left? 57, is that right? Something like that. In that scenario, you have an easy fold. Fold. Why? Because you're in bad shape against their perceived range. Now, there is a case to say, what if they're lunatics and they're going to be all in with any ace and any pair and any suited connector? Well, then obviously ace-queen has become a value bet, right? And you don't fold. This is just a math equation. Download Equilab. It's completely free. Run your hand against their jamming range and you'll see how much equity you have. Then figure out your pot odds and you're going to see that if your opponent's normal, ace-queen is going to have way less equity than it needs to have to justify calling. What size do we use? We already discussed this. About 2.5 times the initial rate, or the 3-bet. A little bit less as they 3-bet bigger, a little bit more as they 3-bet smaller. Only 58 likes. Well, you know, people don't like strategy content, it seems. They want drama. Sorry I don't have any drama for you today. Maybe next time. If you all like this type of content, let me know. I debated having the desktop up so that you all could see some brief math, but I decided against it. I thought this topic was easy enough to where we did not necessarily need it. But if you all like this, click like, click subscribe. I would appreciate it. If you're listening to this on the podcast, the Poker Coaching Podcast, leave a review. I would appreciate it. That goes a long way to letting the internet know that you like me. It lets me know that you like me a little bit, because if, 6 people like the show, that's going to make me think you don't like it. Believe it or not, there are correlations to what people like and what people don't like. For example, one of my videos that has the most views is where Kim Lim folded 4 of a kind. People love drama. They love big hands. They love exciting things. And I understand that, 4-betting and putting your whole stack in as a bluff isn't all that exciting. Well, maybe it is. Probably is, right? I think it is, but if you all don't think that's exciting, I guess that's not necessarily for you. All right. Louis Philippe typed out this equation for you. I don't know if steal should be at the beginning of this, Louis Philippe. I think this is your total equity. Equity equals pot times fold percentage plus pot times bet times win percentage minus... that's not the equation I use, but I'm sure it's close enough for the same thing. You have the cutest kids. Well, thank you. You love the poker coaching quizzes. You're through 738 of them. Goodness gracious, Graham. You might be the person who's gone through the most of them. We have about 1,000 total, so you still have a little bit left. All right. I have to get going. Online Poker's coming to Michigan. Great. Great, great, great. Glad to hear that. Hope you all have a great week. All you can do is make the most of your situation. When people give you lemons, make lemonade out of it. Fun times are ahead. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Again, if you've read any of my books, check out, or go to Amazon, please. Go to wherever you bought them, leave a review. I would highly appreciate that. Thank you to all of the people who left a review so far for my newest book, Excelling at Tough No Limit Hold'em Games. You can get that at jlpoker.com/tough. Also, today is the last day of the Poker Coaching Fall Sale. Check it out at pokercoaching.com/fall sale. And there's a lot there. For example, the 30-day tournament preparation challenge. There every single day for a month. You can go through it a little bit faster if you like. We discuss something to help you get better at tournaments every single day. We also have a cash game challenge. We have a 3-betting challenge. We have loads and loads of classes and courses by many of the best players in the world. People who I am hiring to teach me to play poker. You all may not know this, but making PokerCoaching.com was a little bit selfish because I knew that I wanted to continue learning and getting better at poker. And what's the best way to go about doing that? Well, hiring the best people. So I hired the best people. I'm learning from them, and I'm sharing that with all of you. So you get it at a substantial discount. We're all sharing the cost together. All right, that's going to be it for today. What am I best at, cash games or tournaments? Probably tournaments, but I'm certainly plenty good at cash games. Cash games are a difficult thing to actually assess your skill level compared to the field because I don't think I'm any better than to be fair, in tournaments I'm not better than the best players either. So I guess I'm very competent in both. Just I know my win rates in cash games are as good as all the other big winners, so I guess I'm good at both. I don't know. Interestingly enough, I think I'm probably better at PLO than the average winning player at PLO. But the games don't really exist all that much, right? So given the games don't really exist all that much, then especially tournaments, then it's not worth spending a whole lot of time on. At least for me. Saw me on the list on the Apostle lawsuit. Yes, indeed. Can't talk about that because I'm on the list on the Apostle lawsuit. Turns out they don't like it when you speak openly on the internet. Some people don't like it when you speak openly on the internet. Sorry. Rest assured, everyone. No matter what nonsense comes my way personally, I'm going to always do my best to help all of you improve your poker skills. I'm going to help you win as much money as I can from poker, and I'm going to help you protect your money in poker. And while that may cause Jonathan Little a lot of headaches, because, who knows what's going to happen, I'm happy to do it for all of you. Simple as that. Hope you enjoy it. If you appreciate it. If you want to support me in an impending lawsuit, go to PokerCoaching.com and sign up. PokerCoaching.com/fall sale. If you want to donate to Jonathan Little's lawyer fund, go to PokerCoaching.com/fall sale and sign up. All right, have a great day. Enjoy yourselves. Make the most of your opportunity. All you can do is do your best. Click like, click subscribe. Thank you all very much. And I'll talk to you later.